Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Soberful podcast, and I am joined today by Jeremy Lipkowitz. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, nice to be here.
Welcome to the Soberful podcast. So I was just saying to Jeremy, I get loads of solicitations for people who want to come on the podcast, and I want to say 90% of them are just like, I'm not interested. But as soon as I saw yours, I was like, I really want to speak to this guy. Because, well, first of all, I mean, why don't you introduce yourself? Because it's so interesting, and I'm probably going to get it. A former Buddhist monk. Okay, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I have a kind of an interesting background and a lot of different things in my background. But what I usually say is, I'm a coach for men who are struggling with porn addiction. I do have a background in genetics and genomics. My background is really in the sciences. I was working on a PhD in genetics. And I also have a background in Buddhist meditation and taught meditation for many years. Also spent some time as a monk in Asia.
Wow.
So I kind of bring together the scientific world and a bit of the meditative spiritual traditions into my recovery work and the work that I do with men. But the work I do really is born out of my own history with porn addiction and coming out of that and wanting to help others.
Okay, so that's why I wanted to speak to you. So I'll just say, this is probably not a conversation to have when you're in the car with your kids. So that's what immediately kind of got my interest, because I have worked with sex addiction back in the days when I was a psychotherapist and worked in rehab, and seen how miserable it is. And I have over the years got more and more concerned with how the internet has changed our access to porn. And I'm the mother of 2 boys, and it's really one of my biggest concerns is I think that a lot of people are really kind of naive about the impact of porn and how the accessibility of porn. That's the big thing. The accessibility is just, I don't think we can get our heads around what anybody can get on their phone at any point. So why don't we start with your story? I'd love to know what your journey was.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to start my journey with porn when it wasn't as accessible. It wasn't as easy to get. And so for me, it started at a very young age with just getting interested in sexuality and starting to see images and pictures and things that made me feel good. When I saw these images, it brought some tingling sensations into my body. And as a young, curious boy, that was just a natural curiosity. For me, it started with comic book characters and the lingerie section of the Macy's catalog that would come in the mail. So it started quite innocently. And slowly over time, we got the internet at my house. We got AOL and dial-up, and you started to be able to download images, photos. And it just slowly progressed to the point where when I got to college, I was watching porn every night, through the internet. And it progressed to the point where it was every night for 1 to 2 hours a night. I would go home, lock the door, go into my bedroom, lock the door, and start to get into online pornography. And I started to notice just how much it was impacting my relationships, impacting my life, my happiness. So I did have a bit of an existential crisis moment, turning point, where I realized how much it was causing suffering in my life. And that's when I decided to change.
Can you talk about that? How was it? What did that look like?
Yeah, for me, I had never questioned porn. I kind of always, I was ashamed of it, obviously. There was a reason I was doing it behind closed doors and locked doors.
Yeah.
And I think many boys have this young experience when they're a child and their mom walks in on them and shrieks and screams at them. And so it's a very formative experience. You basically think, oh, this is wrong. I'm wrong for my sexuality, but it makes me feel good. So I'm going to keep doing it. But I have to hide this from now on. And so that is such a formative experience for so many young boys, where they get taught that their sexuality is wrong. If somebody sees, they'll scream and shout and make them feel bad. So that's when they start doing it in private. So, for me, I'd never really questioned oh, is this leading to a lot of my suffering? It was just something that slowly seeped into my life. The turning point for me was when I was still at the University of California at Davis. That's where I went to undergrad. And I had just finished my undergrad degree, but I was staying in the university for a year doing research in a laboratory. So I was around 23 years old. Maybe I was a young man. And I remember this one day where everything shifted for me. I was walking down the street in Davis, California. My life was incredible. I had just graduated with highest honors from this university. I had a lot of friends. I was sociable. I was well liked. I was captain of a
Mm.
sports team. You know,
Mhm.
I had a really amazing life. And I remember walking down the street, the skies were blue, everything in my life was great. And I saw these two, you know, young women, these college women, maybe sophomores or juniors in college, walking in front of me. And I remember being so consumed with this feeling of lust, of just desire and lust and craving at objectifying these women walking in front of me and staring at their bodies. And it was in that moment that I realized a few things. One, I realized that state of lust is a state of suffering. When you're looking at something you don't have and what you want, but you don't have it, that is what suffering is. When there's something you want that you don't have, or when there's something you have that you don't want, that's what suffering is. You have some pain that you don't want, you suffer
Mm.
for it. You have something that you desire, that you crave after, and you don't have it, you're suffering. And so I realized how much suffering in my life I was experiencing because of my sexual lust, of lusting after people all the time. The other thing I realized is that, you know, in that moment, I realized I have everything I want. Everything I put my mind to, I achieve. I have friends, I have lovers, I have good grades, and yet I'm still miserable because I'm always focused on what I don't have. And it was in that moment where I realized I'm never going to be happy. If I keep living this way, I'm going to be miserable for the rest of my life because it's not about what I have, it's about my relationship to things. And the third thing I realized was probably the most important. I saw my future in that moment. I realized that if I don't make a change, I am going to end up as some 65, 70-year-old man hitting on girls at college bars. And I was
Mm.
going to be alone and miserable and empty. And I might be having sex, but I wouldn't be fulfilled. I would be living kind of an empty shell of a life. And that future of seeing myself as some creepy 65-year-old dude hitting on girls at college bars, it scared me. And I said,
Mm.
this is not what I want in my future. What I want is deep, fulfilling relationship and a sense of happiness and contentment and beauty in my life. So that was kind of the existential crisis that sent me down a rabbit hole of looking into what happiness really is. And fortunately, I ended up finding books on Buddhist philosophy and some positive psychology and learning about neuroscience and neuroplasticity. And that got me into Buddhist meditation, which totally changed my life and just fundamentally put my life on a 180-degree, you know, in the opposite direction. And that's what got me into meditation.
So, can I ask you, how did this relationship with porn impact your romantic relationships with women?
Yeah. So one of the other things that I started to notice when I had this existential crisis is I started to realize how porn was making me have such high and unrealistic expectations of my partners, because every time that I was logging on to porn, I was reinforcing these unrealistic expectations of what bodies are supposed to look like. You know, rather than normal bodies with average this or average that, or a little bit of belly fat or body hair, I was seeing the most perfect manicured porn stars every night. And I was
Acting.
yeah,
Acting.
acting in a
Yeah.
fantasy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was hardwiring in this belief that that's what bodies are supposed to look like. And that's what I should expect when I'm being intimate with someone or in a
Mm.
relationship, that they should look like some 18-year-old porn star that I see acting out a fantasy. And so I just started to realize that that was actually playing out in my relationships. I was having these unrealistic expectations, becoming very perfectionistic, both with my partners and with myself. Also, the sense of self worth and feeling not good enough and all the things that come from that. But one of the other things, and this is kind of more pervasive, is the way that porn made me addicted to novelty. Because that's what porn does, is every time you log on to a porn site, you're scrolling through hundreds or thousands of thumbnails and videos, and every time you see a new face or a new scene or a new position, you get a little hit of dopamine.
Mm.
And you start to associate arousal and happiness and pleasure with novelty. And so you don't think, oh, happiness comes from being in a committed relationship with the same person. You start thinking, oh, my happiness comes from finding something new, finding something more extreme. And you just start to kind of relate to your life that way, that happiness is in something more, something better, something bigger. And that can have drastic consequences on relationships.
It's all about the dopamine, and you've kind of clarified there, because I've studied this quite deeply, my background is in women's studies and addiction, that it's progressive,
Mm-hmm.
that
It
it
escalates.
escalates and it's progressive. That can translate into the real world in harm to women.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the other, like the whole other crazy thing we don't talk about is just how much of what modern day porn is so, because it's extreme and because it's, it's geared towards what will get people to click. It can be often violent, misogynistic, extreme. I mean, that's why on the front page of Pornhub, you see, a lot of slapping and choking and, all kinds of stuff that is just, it's fine for two consenting adults who are, know what they are interested in and haven't been skewed by something. But when you're a 10-year-old boy and 90% of what you're seeing on the porn you're watching is choking, you start thinking, oh, this is what healthy sex looks like. So it kind of really takes out that question of, do people even know what they're getting into? It's warping people's sense of what's healthy sexuality is.
It really is. I'm kind of sitting here quite terrified. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, what are we doing to a generation? Because of the impact on girls, because girls are not really into porn. I mean, I know there's always exceptions of women, but like it's a male thing, but we're very aware of it. And
Well, girls are watching it too. I mean, definitely more men are into porn than women, but it's actually over the past years, it's actually more and more women are watching it and more young girls are watching it. And the problem is young girls are getting the messages as well that this is what healthy sex looks like. So imagine a 10, 11, 12-year-old girl who's interested in sexuality logs on and sees, oh, girls are getting slapped and choked and anal is everywhere and they seem to be enjoying it. So this is what I'm supposed to enjoy. This is what sex looks like. And the other thing, I bring this up all the time, is you never, ever in a porn scene or porn video see a girl say no to sex and that being respected. You never see that because then it wouldn't be a porn video. And so young boys and young girls are also getting the message that anytime a boy makes a move or makes an advance, that you're not allowed to say no. Or if you do say no, the boy just has to push harder and he can get what he wants. And so we're giving people these just warped perceptions of what healthy sex is about.
it's
Sorry to be
I mean,
a Debbie
no,
Downer
I
here.
mean, it's not. I'm not surprised. I knew all of this stuff, and it's extremely concerning when you're a parent. It's quite terrifying because what you're describing is we all have, majority of us, a healthy development of sexual interest, right? I remember I grew up in the analog era. I remember looking at the catalogs. Like I remember we did, like a couple of my girlfriends, like the catalogs where like back in the day, and seeing the bulges and whatever and giggling and like kind of, oh God, that's so innocent. It's so innocent.
If only we could go back to that time.
Yeah. And so having a sexual awakening is part of growing up, and it's can be a magical and beautiful thing, but we are corrupting it so
Totally.
badly.
And it's one of the most important conversations that we need to have is a
Yeah.
nuanced conversation, because you find people on the two extremes. You find people saying porn is sinful and it's of the devil and everything is wrong. And then you find people on the other extreme saying any kind of talk about any form of sexuality being unhealthy is sex shaming, and you're just being conservative or you're being a prude, and we just need to celebrate all forms of sexual expression. And the truth is, it's somewhere in the middle. It's like there are unhealthy outlets for sex, and we need to acknowledge that yes, sex is beautiful and it is magical, and we're not here to shame sexuality, but there are unhealthy ways of engaging with it.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. It is that's the two extremes. It's like it's conservative, married, missionary position, that's it. And the other side is it's sex positive. And I always felt like the sort of I tend to lean liberal, but I'm more and more coming like away from that, because I'm like, whenever it's this sex positive, it always feels to me like, that just still feels like that's men's sexual needs. It really doesn't feel like that's massively positive for girls and women, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It feels a bit like gaslighting and grooming.
It is. And what a lot of people aren't aware of is that this kind of whole female empowerment, women's empowerment thing around the porn industry and OnlyFans and all this stuff is it's from the porn companies themselves that are trying to promote this and say, hey, they're trying to kind of whitewash it and say, no, this is female empowerment. Right. And, it's to recognize that.
The Scottish, I think it's the Scottish government are trying to pass a law or something. I can't remember the full details, but there was an article in the newspaper and they always wheel out the happy hooker. Like the happy hooker, loved her job, gave her loads of flexibility, got into it at 18, not a problem, likes making people happy, and is going to be affected by this law. And it's like, yeah, go interview all the women who have been trafficked or are in poverty or have a pimp or have like self-esteem of a squashed gnat and no belief that they can be more than a sexual object. Go interview those women, because there's always a happy hooker. And you're right, we need to have, and so that seems to be your mission, right? Is we've got to have these nuanced conversations.
That's my main mission, is conversations, awareness and conversations, because there are differing opinions, around the topic of sex work. It's a nuanced one, because that's going to exist whether we like it or not. And when you make it illegal, you just push it down into the black market and into the underground. And that's when people do really get abused. So like I lived in Amsterdam for many years, where it is legal there, and the sex workers there do have more protection and are less likely to be trafficked and abused. And so there are some nuances there that I'm not an expert on, but I think we need more conversations about it, rather than just it being this icky taboo subject that we don't even touch. For me, the porn one is much more black and white. Like it's just kind of obviously harmful and just screws with everyone. But we need to have conversations. We need to talk about this in a way of really understanding what are the harms, because so many guys aren't even aware of how this is harming their life because it's so normalized in our society.
Yeah, and I want to go there. I just want to go back to the sex work, because I use the term prostitution, not sex work, because the inside of a woman's body is not a place of work. And I think Germany has relaxed its laws, and it's catastrophic for women and girls. The Norwegian model is, I understand there will always be prostitution. I would like to live in a world that we don't. But we have to go after the pimps and the punters, not the women. Totally. We support the women. They're not criminalized ever. They're supported. But I have lots of opinions about like legitimizing sex work, because are you a parent? Okay. So it's like anybody listening, right? If sex work is just work, like my work, like your work. Do you know a 17-year-old girl? What about going doing an internship in a brothel? Like just any 17-year-old girl. How would that? Why would you not do that? Because what we do is we create a subclass of women. So it's not like the women I know, it's not their daughters. It's not the nice girls. It's a subclass of women, and those subclass of women tend to be women who have been abused in care, etc. That they're the women who make up that community. And so I'm not sex work, it's prostitution, and we need to protect the women and girls, and we need to get that right back, because I think there's a direct link with porn, right? I think like the expansion of that is
and I'm not here to try to defend whether we call it sex work or prostitution. Like I just again go back to that, we need to have conversations about it, because we need to actually be able to study and say, how is this harming young women, and we need to stop having this taboo that we can't talk about these things, and stop just saying just like shutting down whenever the topic comes up, which people do around porn or prostitution and all these things. And we need to be able to talk about it, just as you and I are, we might have things that we agree on and things we disagree, but hopefully we could have a conversation and actually kind of explore it and say, okay, how is this impacting our society?
So tell me about your rock bottom and how you got out of this. So you were in your 20s when you just began to see this is not like, this isn't like, it's kind of an awakening, isn't it? It's like there's enjoyment and fun, but then you're beginning to have this realization that it actually isn't in my real life. Like kind of what brought you, like what was your rock bottom and how did you get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, my rock bottom, was that day where I was walking down the street and just realized, I am going to be, the real feeling for me was that I was a slave to lust.
Right.
That I was not
Addiction.
living kind of a free life. I was a
Yeah.
slave to any kind of
Disowned me.
impulse or craving. Exactly. I
Right.
couldn't
I
go
wasn't
to a
free.
cafe and yeah, I didn't have a free mind, that my mind was out of control, and I didn't want to live enslaved to this feeling of sexual desire, because I could also see the ways that it harmed people, treating women like objects, harms them. And so that was the rock bottom for me, was realizing that I'm going to be miserable for the rest of my life if I keep living this way.
So what did you do? Did you just stop and was it fine? How did you, because you're
Yeah,
describing addiction.
yeah, totally. For me, so it did send me into this, quest for exploring what is real fulfillment in life. What does it mean to live a deeply fulfilled life? And that's when I started finding some of these books on Buddhist philosophy, and that's the path that got me out, was learning how to practice meditation, learning how to be mindful of my emotions that were coming up. I started realizing that my addiction to pornography was a coping mechanism for dealing with difficult emotions that I didn't know how to deal with, for dealing with loneliness, dealing with anxiety and insecurity and frustration. And these are things that many men in particular experience, but they don't know how to process, because men often don't get taught these. We don't have healthy role models. We don't, especially when I was young, we didn't have men's groups. I mean, women have a lot of places where they can connect with women and talk about their
Mm,
emotions, and men typically don't have those things. It's
mm,
very sad, and it's changing. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I run a men's group, and there are a lot of men's groups out there. But learning how to, first of all, just be aware of your emotional state, to notice when loneliness is coming up. A lot of guys aren't aware of their emotions. They just have some unpleasant emotion and they don't want to be with it. And so they say, okay, let me log on to porn and numb out and
yeah.
push this down. And so
Yeah.
learning, for me, mindfulness is really about learning how to work skillfully with your emotions, so that they
Hmm.
don't control you, but that you can actually, make space for those emotions and move forward skillfully.
Mm.
So a lot of my pathway out of it was through meditation. I ended up traveling to Asia and going on a lot of these silent meditation retreats, learning how to work with my mind and my compulsive behaviors, and kind of just be aware of what was happening.
So you kind of developed a recovery program for yourself, right? You kind of
Yeah,
figured it out.
in a certain way, it's quite funny. I didn't associate really with the word addict and the word
Right.
recovery until 10 years later, when I started
Wow.
working with men, and I realized,
Right.
oh, there are whole systems of recovery, and there's 12-step programs and
Mm.
sobriety meetings, and these. I just realized my mind was a slave to these things, and I was out of control, and I needed a way to break free from that. And so it was much more me just getting into Buddhism, and only later realized how much of an overlap there is with Buddhist philosophy, which for me is a very secular thing. It's not a religious thing. There's no God to pray to. Just how much overlap there is between secular Buddhist philosophy and the recovery world, because it really is, it's a lot about taking ownership, having awareness, acting with intention, connecting with your values, all those things that we do in the recovery world.
So you became a Buddhist monk. For how long?
Yeah, only a month. It wasn't some grand thing. So it's quite interesting. These silent meditation retreats, I started going on silent meditation retreats when I first went to India, and ended up going on many after that. And these are 10 to 12 to 14-day retreats where you're not speaking or reading or writing, just
Wow.
meditating. No electronics, no books, no journaling. So they're quite intense. You're just being with your. A lot of people think, oh, I'll bring a journal, I'll read some books while I'm there. But on these, there's no talking, no reading, no writing, no electronics.
How are you at the end of that? Because I did a silent retreat once for a weekend and I almost went doolally because I'm like such an extrovert.
Yeah. Well, it's quite interesting. What I like to tell people is that you don't go crazy on a retreat. You just start to realize how crazy you've always been. Because your mind is doing that in your day-to-day life anyway. You just happen to be distracted from it for the most part, because we're doing so much stuff. But when you slow down enough and you remove all the distractions, you see the way your mind, in Buddhism, we call it the monkey mind. The mind jumps from here to there to here to there.
I've heard of
and
it.
it's going from anger to frustration to jealousy to sadness, and it's out of control. And on a retreat, you get the opportunity, first of all, to see how crazy it is. And then secondly, you get the opportunity to learn how to work with it. Like going to the gym, you're training your mind in certain qualities. That's one of the foundations of Buddhism, is just training your mind in qualities that lead to happiness. So we train our mind in compassion. We train our mind in equanimity, in patience, in insight, and clear seeing, and all these things, mental qualities that directly lead to the state of happiness and inner peace. You can train your mind. And that gets back to neuroplasticity, which also changed my life. Understanding that the mind is plastic and you can rewire your mind and strengthen certain qualities. That's what meditation is. It's training your mind. These retreats became very important for me in my recovery process of breaking free from porn addiction. So I ended up going on roughly one retreat a year, sometimes a little more than that. And I ended up signing up for a month-long silent retreat in Burma with one of my teachers. And it was on that retreat that at this monastery, you had the opportunity to ordain as a monk or a nun if you wanted to. So I took the opportunity to ordain while I was there. In Southeast Asia, temporary ordinations are very common. It's not...
Right.
In many religions, when you ordain, it's like you ordain for life.
Right.
But in Southeast Asia, many young men ordain as a monk almost as a rite of passage. You ordain for a month, and then it's called disrobing. You kind of go back to becoming a normal person after that.
Okay, so how did you get into this work? So you healed yourself. Did you have many relapses? How was the process?
Yeah, it's interesting. In the very beginning, I think I had quite a few relapses before I got really settled into my recovery. When I say in the beginning, it's like when I first traveled when I first realized, oh, I am addicted to this thing. It took about 6 months before I was really able to break free. After I started going on these retreats, I was really didn't have any relapses for a long time, for many years. And then, every once in a while, once every couple of years, like something will pop in, because porn is very accessible and the line between porn and Instagram is very thin these days.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the things I like to be honest about with the people I work with, is that it can happen. It's the analogy I like to give is to imagine if you were a cocaine addict in recovery and you had to carry cocaine with you in your pocket everywhere you went. Is what it's like to be a porn addict in recovery. Because everyone's walking around with access to porn in their pocket at all times.
Yeah.
And so it's a very difficult... Many of the guys I work with have also recovered from substance abuse, from drugs or alcohol. And almost all of them say that porn is the hardest one for them to kick, just because of how pervasive it is and how accessible it is.
I wonder if it's similar to food, like food addiction and eating disorders, because you have to eat. But they, with an eating disorder, they would have their abstinence would be, they don't use laxatives or binge or like starve, right? Like they have 3 meals a day. Like that's what they have or whatever. I wonder if, because you are right. I mean, I remember that it was Miley Cyrus. It was one of her pop videos. And I was like, this is pornographic. Like she's licking this whatever. I'm like, what? It's not just like
sexualized media in our society.
Sexualized media.
It's hyper-sexualized. Totally. I mean,
oh God,
it's wild, the world that we live in today. Like if you are a young boy or young girl, how hyper-sexualized and objectified women are in our society. I'm like you. I grew up very liberal. I grew up in California, very liberal, upbringing and all this stuff. And the older I get, the more I kind of lean slightly more conservative, where I'm like, maybe, some of this, maybe we've gone a little too far with some of this or liberal viewpoints.
But we have. And I really think, honestly, I don't think liberals and women fully comprehend male sexuality. And I think male sexuality requires guardrails in our culture. And for a long time, that was religion. Again, rightly or wrongly, it did provide guardrails. And I know what you're saying about women watching porn stuff, but women's sexuality is just very different from male sexuality because we're different. And male sexuality requires guardrails. And I feel that where we've gone is we've removed all guardrails. And that is never going to be good for women and girls.
Yeah. You and I might disagree on this, but I think both need guardrails, because I work with some women as well who the guardrails have come off and have become addicted. Like, women can also become addicted to erotic content. Often it's more erotic literature, but can also get addicted to pornographic material in terms of video content and everything. And so I think we all need guardrails. We all need accountability.
Sure. I mean,
so.
but it's not even. It's not the same.
No,
it just isn't.
Yeah.
Because of the harm. When you get to the bit that's the harm, and I've worked with men. You know, there's that, I like to be a sex addict, right? I've worked with those men and they are miserable and broken. And like, I have a lot of empathy. It's not fun. It's not, it's awful. And they are being harmed, but nothing to the scale that women and girls are being harmed. That's the thing, right? Men and boys are not being harmed in the way that is. But yeah, our sexuality requires guardrails. I think that is. And the guardrails are different for both. I think that's where we are really, what we're agreeing on. Is I think that's the biggest thing. Sexuality requires guardrails, and that's what we have lost that somehow. And it's not. Okay, so tell me what I should do as a mother of two boys.
Boy, unfortunately, you went to the hardest question out there. I mean, if you said, tell me what I should do as a 40-year-old male who's struggling with this, I could help you in a second. What should we do about...
Based on your experience and based on being a man and a boy, what advice would you give someone like me? Yeah,
what I would say is healthy, open, non-shaming conversations about sexuality, to normalize talking about sexuality and say, hey, let's talk about this. You know, we're sexual creatures. You're going to have strong sexual desires for, you know, other people. And porn is a thing. And we need to talk about what it is, and that it's a fantasy created, you know, by moneyed interest. And you need to be aware that this is trying to hijack your attention, and let's talk about it and let's normalize it. And your sexuality is not bad. I mean, that's probably the most important thing, is to not shame and make them feel bad for their sexuality, because that's what leads to the addiction spirals, is feeling like, oh, this is wrong. My sexuality is bad. I need to hide it. And so therefore I'm going to keep doing it, but I'm just going to do it in isolation and hide it from everyone I care about. So healthy conversations is probably the most important thing I would recommend for a parent.
Yeah, well, that's what we try and have. That's the road I'm going down, is healthy, non-shaming. And I also want to educate that the participation in causing harm, you have to make those choices. You know, there's not, you know, when you consume something, is someone, you know, I want to tell you the best advice for sexuality is in the big book of AA. It's the best. And it's I'm going to paraphrase it. It says, nobody can, these aren't the exact words, nobody can tell you what your sexuality is. That's up for you to decide. And you just need to ask yourself two questions. Is this selfish? And does this harm another person?
Yeah.
Ancient spiritual wisdom.
Yeah.
And I that is what I'm going to try and impart to my sons, is that, you know, nobody can say it's this or it's that or this is wrong, that you have to decide with your own moral guide, and you have to ask yourself, is this selfish and am I harming another person? And I think that when you participate in porn, there's a pretty big argument that someone's being harmed there, including yourself.
And the one thing I would add on top of that is also the conversation around, is this in alignment with my values?
Yes.
Like, this is the other thing that maybe is getting lost when we lost religion, is talking about values and talking about ethics and talking about morals and in integrity. And like, is this how I want to treat another human being? When this girl gets slapped in this video, even though she looks like she likes it because she's, you know, moaning in pleasure, does that feel right to my value system? And the reason I say that is that if it's just this, okay, am I harming anyone? Or am I harming myself? It's easy for people to see what they're watching and saying, no, nobody's being harmed. She's enjoying it. This is a nice production value. You know, she looks like she's getting paid. She's an OnlyFans model. She's making millions. It's easy for people to lie to themselves and say, nobody's being harmed. I'm not harming. This is just for me. Nobody's being harmed with this. And so getting people to align with their values and understand what their values are and say, am I living in integrity with this, is an important aspect there.
I love that. That's great. So in the last few minutes, tell me about your work and how you help people, because I just think what you're doing is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. The main component is the group that I run. I mean, I work with people one-on-one, but I run a men's group. And honestly, the biggest transformations that I see is when men finally have a place where they feel safe to open up and admit that they have a problem and look around a room and realize that they're not alone. It's wild that almost every single week you see one of the guys in the community just being like, wow, it feels so amazing to be able to finally open up about this and realize I'm not alone. And that alone can do a lot to heal. So I run a community, and that's a lot of the work I do, teaching guys about mindfulness and self-compassion, how to use some of these tools of working with the mind is a big component of that. It can really be that simple. I mean, some of it is accountability, just actually letting yourself be held accountable when you know you want to change, being in a community that holds you accountable. There's a lot of other, I wish it was easy, like, do these 3 steps and you'll break free from porn.
Yeah.
But it's more like you need a full tool belt to understand when you come across different problems in your recovery, which tool to pull out and apply to the situation. Because sometimes you need a little bit of compassion. Sometimes you need that tough love of accountability and somebody saying, hey, man, get your act together. I know you can do better than this. You're making excuses. Because this is similar to the guardrails. We need that, particularly as men. We need other men who are there to call us out and to call us up, to call us into the men we were supposed to be, men of integrity and values and courage and real strength. And most guys just don't have a place for that, which is really sad.
I love what you're doing. I could not support it more. I just think you are doing such important work. What do you, I mean, there needs to be more of you, right? There needs to be.
There are, the coolest thing that I see, a lot of the guys in my program, once they've gotten a hold on their own situation, it feels like almost 50% of them end up either wanting to do something similar or doing something similar.
Wow.
They end up becoming coaches as well. They end up starting their own podcast to talk about this work. They realize that being of service to other men and helping other guys through this is one of the most fulfilling things that they can do. And so there is this ripple effect where you're seeing more and more guys. And it starts, this is why when you can be vulnerable and talk about your own history with this, it gives the safety for another guy to say, hey, I can talk about this too. I can be vulnerable and share that I struggled with this also. And so that, it is this positive ripple effect that is slowly moving out. There's a growing movement of guys who are saying, yeah, this isn't right. This isn't healthy for our daughters and our sisters and for our young men. And you're seeing it more and more, which is great.
I mean, just thank you. Like everything, like we started this conversation and I'm like, oh my God, I'm just going to lock my sons away. I like it really, because of my work, right? Because I have seen, like, I'm not, I've been on parent forums and they've been like, no, well, we all did it. We all looked at, I'm like, no. We were looking at catalogs. They're looking at.
It's a different thing.
Like beyond anything you could imagine. And it's affecting their neuro pathways and it's going to affect. And like every parent says, here's the thing. Every parent says, like, I just want my kids to be happy. I just want them to be happy. Well, if you want your kids to be happy, first of all, no one's happy all the time. But if you want your kids to be happy, there is one secret. And that's being able to form and establish lasting relationships. And if you want them to have lasting relationships, then they need to have guardrails, the moral values that you talk about, healthy relationship with their sexuality and our current situation. So I need you to galvanize this movement because you're right. I think a lot of, this is a hot topic right now. Young men are lost. And I think there's lots of conversations here that need to be had. And there is something about the role of religion that is lost, that is not, it's missing. There's something is missing now.
Yeah. A few things I want to say. One is for anyone who says this thing of, oh, we watched porn in our days and we turned out fine. The difference between porn then and porn now is like the difference between weed back in the 1960s and the fentanyl crisis now. I mean, if you see these YouTube videos of people on fentanyl in cities and they're slumped over, it's a zombie apocalypse. I mean, drugs these days are so much more extreme and different than what they were back in the 1950s and 60s. And to say, oh, we smoked dope back in the 1960s, it's like, well, you didn't smoke, you didn't take trank, you weren't turning into a zombie. It's a different ballgame. And it's the same with porn. The amount of porn, the accessibility, how much of a hyperstimulant it is, and how easy it is for young men to get at it when they're feeling more isolated than ever. It's a recipe for disaster. I mean, it really is a different thing. And it's not just porn. I mean, video games, all vapes, all kinds of the stimulant economy that we live in, the dopamine nation. I mean, if Dopamine Nation is a fantastic book for any parent to read.
She's been on the podcast, actually. She's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. I mean, she talks about her addiction to romance novels.
Yeah.
That was her kind of awakening to, this is a thing that can hook any of us. And so, we live in that dopamine nation now with social media and video games and isolation. Isolation is a big one, and young men are becoming more and more isolated, having, fewer dates and fewer friends. And
they're having sex, like they're not having as much sex. And they're also like, I was just reading about this recently. It's a whole, like, they're like, a lot of young men, their relationship is with porn. They're not, and
we didn't even start to talk about AI girlfriends and that
whole. Oh God.
I mean, I thought we were going to end on an upbeat note, but let me just take it down a notch. Yeah, I mean, the AI porn and AI. I mean, it's not just the AI girlfriends, but also AI generated porn is really dark because it can create really dark stuff. I mean, in terms of like child type stuff that police can't actually arrest anybody because it's not real, and they're having trouble tracking down real stuff because it's just, there's a lot of darkness on the web.
And you're right, where you started saying is all these young men are just going to end up 60, 70 alone. And it is the secret to happiness, secret to a successful life is our relationships, our intimate relationships, our friendships. And all types of addiction massively interfere this. And then, they get angry, they get violent, that's in a way that's different. Oh my goodness. Jeremy, I feel like I could continue to talk to you. I'm so glad that you came on. Tell people where they can find you if they want to work with you or if they want to find out more.
Yeah, if you go to unhookedacademy.com, you can learn about the program that I run. If you want to just learn more about the work I do and listen to more of this type of stuff, I have my own podcast called Unhooked. It's on all the podcast platforms. So those two would be the best. I'm also on Instagram and all those other places, but I would say the podcast or YouTube, and then unhookedacademy.com for my work.
And even though a lot of this stuff is really, really awful, there is hope. Like, I've got a lot of hope actually from talking to you that there is a way out of this, and it seems like, I think, a movement beginning. I think it's a fledgling status. Would you agree? But I think there's a real...
I want us to end on hope because I really am hopeful. I mean, you are seeing this topic around porn and the harms of porn and all these things. You're seeing it on the biggest podcast in the world, Andrew Huberman, The Diary of a CEO. You're seeing huge names and huge celebrities, Terry Crews opening up and talking about his addiction to porn. So you're seeing big role models in the space talking about this and normalizing that it's okay to talk about how porn is not healthy for young men. And so I really, even though there is a lot of stuff we need to talk about and be aware of, and there's some dark stuff out there, it does feel like the tide is turning and things are shifting, and there's a movement growing where people are saying, hey, this is not women's empowerment. This is part of the machine that is damaging young men and young women. And so I'm quite hopeful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an incredible interview. I'd love to invite you back whenever you feel like you want to talk about something else, because this is a subject as I said, I'm really interested in, and I think it's really, really important. I think it's one of the most, for me, it's one of the most important topics, cross sex, everything I'm interested in. I'm a mom of boys, my background in addiction, spirituality. I just think it's such an important topic. So thank you so much, Jeremy.
Yeah, it's been lovely coming on.
And everyone, please reach out to Jeremy if this has resonated with you. I really think that he can help a lot of people. And I'll be back next week.
I dreamt that you were twisting through 7 suns of gold, and the gypsy was insisting that his story must be told.